threats and we need to adapt. My name is Valentin Nene from Euro-Atlantic Resilience Center, together with Gabriela Matei, my colleague, and our colleague Maria, which is in London, on another panel on cyber. We are working on emerging and disruptive technologies. I won't take much long time. I want to introduce our moderators because we have awesome moderators that will help you and introduce some awesome speakers as well. So we are honored to be connected with Austin, Texas. It's morning. Good morning, Aaron, and good morning to your speakers. Aaron Pluto is a global strategic advisor, world traveler, and freelance writer who helps strategic leaders and the public to make sense of the world. It's very nice put. He has served as a military commander, combat medevac pilot, foreign area officer, intelligence professor, and is a trusted voice on global policy and security. You'll find more about him on our website. And also, I'm proud that we have a woman in defense that has a lead on this panel, Liliana Grosaro-Philip, International Relations and Security Analyst, leads the political research groups as its president and founder. Has expertise as senior expert with Women in International Security Romania, so has focuses on military affairs, defense industry, economic security, and transatlantic cooperation. If you'll watch her, I'm sure you'll see her all over the world in Seoul, Warsaw, and the Middle East, at least I have seen. So I am glad that we are all here. Time is the most precious currency that we have, and I want our discussions to be of meaning. Thank you. Liliana.
Thank you so much, Valentin. So good morning or good afternoon to everyone. It is my great pleasure to welcome you today to our panel, Bridging Continents, Tech Innovation and Startup Acceleration for a Resilient Defense. I would like to start by expressing my special thanks to the Capital Factory, to Meg Vrebel, that she is not on the stage, but she was the one organizing everything there, and it's very difficult to do it because our team is here in Romania and they were there, but they were wonderful and I thank them very, very much. As well, I want to thank you to my friend Aaron Pluto, who will be there, the moderator, and who is much more than a moderator. He is a friend of Romania, and as well, I'm very grateful for that. So as Valentin said, I'm representing Political Research Group. We're doing a project in security and defense as well. We visited Texas, Austin, that's why we fell in love with Capital Factory, and we were thinking that this event is best to be organized together with them. This panel comes at a crucial time because of the United States-Romania strategic partnership. We need to discuss much more about how to go into the concrete level in our cooperation. We have a very important cooperation in defense, but now this panel will be about concrete projects. So we have companies here, we have a representative that can explain us how to build this ecosystem and how to help startups to scale and to sell to governments, because selling in a defense and security environment, it's not the same as other industries. So I won't speak very much because I'm only the moderator, and I want as well to make the setup for this panel. We will have a keynote speech coming from Her Excellency, our state advisor, Mr. Florin Spătaru, but not before giving the floor to Aaron Pluto to introduce the stage from Austin. Thank you so much for everyone being here tonight and in the morning.
Well, good morning and good evening to Bucharest from Austin, Texas. As Liliana and Valentin mentioned, my name is Aaron Pluto. I work here in the Austin area in the defense tech ecosystem. I'm joined by CEO of Ametrine, Brandon Cates, Colonel Clay McVeigh from the Army Applications Laboratory, and Gordon Darty, one of the co-founders of the Capital Factory, where we are seated today. Liliana mentioned that a delegation from Romania did visit us here in April, and we were very glad to receive them. And through that visit, Romanian delegates were able to see the ecosystem that has been in place from approximately 2018, starting with the Army Futures Command being placed here in Austin, Texas, and then the Capital Factory growing up along with it to enable private ventures to partner with the Department of Defense to make their products and their services available to the military. We've also seen a large surgence of foreign partners that have come into Austin, Texas, and have become very interested in what we're doing here to look at the future needs of the U.S. military and how we can partner together. So I invite anyone from the audience who is interested in taking part in growing together with the city of Austin and with this ecosystem. You're very welcome to come and visit Austin, Texas at any time, but we'll be glad to host you. I am not going to take very long as well because I think my panelists have a lot more interesting things to say. We have among the panelists decades of experience in the private sector and in the military. We have one uniformed member of the U.S. military still active. Brandon and I are military veterans, and Gordon very much represents the other side of the world with private equity and startups and the incubator here. So I think you've got a very rounded out panel of experience that will be very interesting to discuss. So I thank you very much for joining us, and we're very pleased to be a part of this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. Now I'll give the floor to Her Excellency, our Minister, to give the keynote speech.
Thank you, Liliana. Good morning, Austin. Bună ziua celor prezenți la București. Good afternoon to the people who are present in Bucharest. It is my pleasure to open this very interesting panel, which is tackling critical aspect for the economy, but also for the current geopolicy. When I became a minister, having under my responsibility the defense industry, it was a question mark which I started from the very beginning. What am I going to do as a minister for this sector? And I was looking more at this defense industry only from the state point of view, having a number of 14 companies, state-owned companies, and holding, as I was calling it, taking care of the, let's say, urgent needs of the Ministry of Defense. But further on, I discovered that the defense industry and defense ecosystem is more than that. In the registry of the private operators for defense industry, there are more than 100 companies, startups or small and medium companies who are involved in this business. And I realized that this defense system is more than what the state is defining and allocating budget for this ecosystem, considering the needs of the National Ministry of Defense. Further on, as a state councillor in the government, I had the opportunity to have meetings with different countries. I was present even 2 weeks ago in Kiev in the Defense Forum. And I realized that the success of the NATO countries and the countries who are sharing the same principles and the same values cannot go only with the effort of the state. It should go also with the effort of the private companies who are more agile. They have better understanding, and why not, they are more flexible than the state is. And that is bringing me the idea that for every country, knowing and understanding what are the challenges we are facing right now, and trying to define a defense industry, which is not only the supporting the defense strategy of the country, but also acting as a major or important player in the region. You have to combine the effort, you have to combine the money, and you have to create what I call it an integrated policy for the defense ecosystem. Yes, I was talking many times that defense industry might be a driver for economic growth. But that is going beyond that, because everybody who is investing in a country like Romania, or in a country who is on a border with a conflict, they all talk about security. How security is seen, how is, let's say, defined by the country, and how secure are we to develop our business. From that perspective, I would say that I started already as a minister, and let's say I was encouraging also different players to come with us and create a strategy for defense industry. And the strategy for defense industry is including the private sector, the startups, the young generations who are interested at this moment of this sector, but also the state-owned companies. And defining also what is the role of the state in that, how the state is positioning itself from becoming a player, but also a mediator of the whole thing. From that point of view, I do consider that countries like Romania, they need the expertise of the developed countries, also using the strategic partnership we are having with the United States, but also with the other countries, and sharing the knowledge, not inventing the wheel, but putting money in motion in order to create as fast as possible a sustainable environment. One sad thing I learned from my visit in Kiev was that the war is not going to end soon. And what is going to happen in the future is really based on our agility, decision on supporting and helping and protecting our principles and our values. And that would go, apart from what we have lost in the last 30 years, that would go with money allocated, being creative, making parts on one place or another place, and putting all these things together in order to have a final product which will go very soon on the market, and the ministries will very much benefit on that. That's why I'm also welcoming this forum, because that is helping companies and us as policy makers or decision makers to be better, to be more agile, to be to come with a solution which we can promote further on and stand in front of our enemies saying that, yes, we are prepared. Maybe we are not as prepared a couple of years ago when the war started, but now we are prepared to face it. And therefore, I would expect, that's my style, to be pragmatic and, let's say, very direct. I would expect that the companies here or the companies in Romania who have this initiative and have this drive to go in the defense ecosystem, as well as the American companies, to sit together and find, maybe not today, but tomorrow, yes, solutions for us, for every citizen of the United States and of Romania, and those solutions to be properly placed in the public policies we are having right now, or will have tomorrow. Thank you very much for having this opportunity to open it, and looking forward to have ideas which will strengthen our vision on defense industry. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm sure that we will have important ideas. I know because I was there, and I'm grateful that I see Colonel Clay and Brandon and friends. And now I give the floor to Austin, Texas, to Aaron, and to start the presentation of our great speakers. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Thank you again. We are excited to have, as I mentioned earlier, one of the co-founders of the Capital Factory here with us this morning, Gordon Darty. And I would like to ask him if he could give us a brief overview of how startups here in Austin and in the defense tech ecosystem at large start to raise money in the United States, and what his experience has taught him. Thanks, Gordon.
Excellent. Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here, especially for the fact that one of my personal passions is helping build thriving startup and tech innovation ecosystems. I've lived in Austin for 31 years, and we started Capital Factory almost 15 years ago. And so I've been a part of running companies and helping build this ecosystem, and I've had the honor of traveling our country and traveling the world, advising other ecosystems to learn from the Austin story. You can't have a thriving startup ecosystem without the startups, and the startups can't survive without three things: funding, customers, and talent. So I'm going to talk briefly about funding, especially funding in the early stages. It's really important for a new and evolving ecosystem to develop the funding sources for the startups. They usually don't exist in the early days, and the government can help. One foundational thing that every startup founder needs to figure out when they think about fundraising is when to raise the funding, how much to raise, and from which type of investors. I have a very basic formula for the amount of funding to raise. It starts with the amount of funding you raise affords you a combination of time and resources. Time means an amount of time. We call it runway. Resources means things like people, marketing expenditures, dialing up your Amazon hosting services, licensing data sets to train your artificial intelligence. And hopefully you'll agree that if you have new time and resources, you can accomplish things over time. I call those outcomes. So again, the formula is funding gives you time and resources, and with time and resources, you can accomplish outcomes in the future. This is really important because these outcomes that the startup accomplishes is critical to their fundraising success. That's because investors tend to align themselves with very specific stages of a startup's evolution. Most investors do not invest across the whole life cycle of a startup. And so in the stage that we might call the pre-seed stage, this is before there is a working product, before there are customers and revenue, the startup instead has a business plan and a vision, maybe a working prototype. They usually raise money from individuals. We call them angel investors. They also, if they're focused on solutions that the federal government or government institutions might be interested in, this is when they could raise money from grant funding. If they are fortunate enough to raise that funding and get the product into the market with some customers and with some revenue, but not a lot, we might refer to them as a seed stage startup. The angel investors also invest in the seed stage. The grant money for those that are selling to the government usually also exists through what we call the seed stage. But this is where the venture capital funds would start to enter the picture. There are VC funds that invest in the seed stage of a startup when they only have few customers and very little revenue. Also realize that deep tech startups or startups that are rooted in deep science, they often actually don't have a finished product or customers by the time they're in the seed stage. They're still working on that. So even when we say a stage of a startup, it means something different for a software company versus a medical device or biotech or a deep tech startup. And this can be very confusing for founders, and they need to adapt the right vocabulary for their type of startup, and they need to meet with investors that understand that stage. Startups might be fortunate enough to move to the next stage and have more maturity, more repeatability, a full executive team, and they might raise what we call a Series A. So what's really important is if you're raising your pre-seed round of funding, that it gives you enough time and resources to accomplish the outcomes that get the seed stage investors excited. If you're raising your seed round of funding, you need to raise enough money to gain the time and resources necessary to accomplish the outcomes that the Series A investors expect to see. So a best practice in early stage fundraising is understanding what the next stage of investors are going to need to see to get excited and making sure that you raise enough money to accomplish those things. The other thing I'll describe, at least in the United States, about typical early stage investing is, okay, grant funding is one thing. You need to understand the grant process, the rules, the timeline. There is a lot that goes into that, and most founders have never raised money from grant funding, and so they would want to understand that. If they're also going to raise money from angel investors or venture capital funds, the founder needs to understand they are probably going to meet with more than 50 investors as part of that process. Maybe 70, maybe 80. If a founder tells me that it took 100 investor meetings to raise their desired amount of funding, it doesn't shock me. It doesn't surprise me. And that's usually new news to many founders that have never done this before. And because you have to have so many meetings, you must filter out the bad investors, the investors that do not align with your industry or your type of product or your technology or your business model. Investors invest in very certain things. And so the founder needs to understand whether it's an angel investor or a venture capital fund, do those investors invest in either the industry that the startup is focused in, the type of product like robotics, the type of technology like AI, or the type of business model like an online marketplace? If not, don't waste your time on that investor. The VCs make it easy. They have websites, and their websites explain exactly what stage they invest in and what type of companies they invest in. So VCs make it pretty easy. Grant funding from the government is usually very specific. We are looking to fund these types of projects. Angel investors are probably the hardest. Angel investors don't have websites. Their website is their LinkedIn profile, so you can look to see what they have done. If you look at my LinkedIn profile, you will see that my 28-year career in tech was all involved in selling hardware and software to very large enterprise organizations, including the Department of Defense. So you can imagine that my angel investing strategy is aligned with hardware and software companies selling to big companies and governments. It is not aligned with startups that are building mobile apps for consumers. I don't know what questions to ask those startups, and therefore it would be too risky for me to make those investments. So these are some ideas that I wanted to share with the audience, and I hope that's helpful.
Thank you, Gordon. That's very helpful. One note that I wanted to bring to everyone's attention is the discussion before we got up here for the panel. The consensus among all of our panelists today was that we would like to have this more interactive than just a one-way send. So I do have some prepared questions for our panelists to continue driving the conversation forward, but I'd really like to have this more of an interactive conversation. So as we are moving through these discussions, if on the Bucharest side, if there are questions that are pertinent to the panelists' recent comments, I would invite those questions to be interspersed throughout our conversation rather than held to the end. So I'll pause right now before I ask Gordon any of my prepared questions to see if there are any questions from the audience there in Bucharest on Gordon's remarks.
Thank you, Aaron, for mentioning that. So we invite you to, during the presentation that maybe Clay will deliver next, to take notes or to address question after some brief that he will deliver to us. For now, we don't have from here.
Okay. Well, I thank you very much, Liliana. I do have one question regarding barriers. You did mention due diligence, making sure that the industry, the product is aligned with the investors that are out there. Do you see any other barriers that would come up as the startup is looking at potential investors, whether it's angel investors or grant money, et cetera? What common barriers do you see? What common mistakes are made in this ecosystem?
Boy, there's so many mistakes. There's actually so many that I ended up writing a book on it. It's a best-selling book called Startup Success. It's all about early stage fundraising. I would not have been able to write that book if there weren't so many common mistakes that were made in fundraising. These mistakes come from the fact that most startup founders have never raised funding, so they're doing it for the first time. We all make mistakes when we're doing something for the first time, even the second time. So in addition to what I mentioned, many startup founders would not put enough focus on developing out their business plan to make sure they have an investable business. Venture investors are looking for companies that can get really big. Venture investors are taking big risks, meaning we know that there are very high odds that the startup is not going to work out. It's going to fail. And that's okay. We know that's going to happen, but it means that if it does work out, we don't get excited if we only double our money. We need to see a path to 10x, 20x, 50x our investment to offset the ones that crash and burn. Because of this, the startups need to understand the concepts of their market size. Are they putting a solution into a market that is big enough that the startup could even get to $100 million in revenue? If they could only get to $10 million in revenue, that might be a great company with happy customers, happy employees, everybody's making money. It's just not a good business for venture capital investors. So this is one big mistake that the startups only learn sometimes when they are sitting across the table from a venture capitalist like me, and we're asking questions about that. Startups also make a big mistake many times, focusing on building a product and the roadmap to building the product, but they don't focus enough on building the company. Okay, a product alone is difficult, but actually building the whole company around it that acquires customers and keeps them happy and supports them and counts their revenue and expenses correctly. There are a lot of things that go into building a company. And I can tell when I'm meeting a founder that has done a lot of planning and strategy around the product, but not enough around building the company that is going to get to $100 million. Those might be two common mistakes that I see.
Oh, that's very helpful. Thank you. So I wanted to pivot a little bit here, given that we are here in the Capital Factory and you are a co-founder. How does this space help in that connection between the investors and the startups in the defense tech space specifically? What was the idea about the Capital Factory and stepping into this and helping create this ecosystem that makes it unique compared to other cities around the world that you've worked in?
Thanks for asking. I think our mantra, our tagline of being the center of gravity for entrepreneurs in Texas says a lot. And it's because at any stage of a startup's evolution, from the idea stage to the pre-seed, seed, Series A, growth stage, we have members of our community that are aligned with that. We have customers that are here, big corporations, big government, Department of Defense. We have investors, almost 2,000 of them in our network, and we know the types of things they like to invest in. So when we have a startup that is preparing for a round of funding, we can connect them with a personal connection to the right investors. We have talent. There are lots of techies and entrepreneurs and early stage employees that are part of our ecosystem that can join a startup. And then we host lots of events like our Fed Supernova event, which is our cornerstone event for our defense and government partners. And so we have founders, established tech startups, we have Department of Defense, we have investors all coming together for 2.5 days. And that creates these opportunities for founders that would never have an opportunity to meet with an Army colonel, to meet them at a place like Fed Supernova and learn more about grant funding and opportunities for the U.S. Army to become a customer.
So it sounds like a very unique space and a very unique city where these founders and investors come together.
Aaron, here we have some question as well.
Beautiful. Okay. Well, I'll pause my questions. I'd love to hear the questions from Bucharest. Thank you.
Of course.
Okay, thank you. It's a question from my side. In fact, when I hear that you put together all these founders and startups with customers and the people from defense industries, my question is, how do you do that? How do you really do that? How can you put them together? And what draw the attention, for example, of, I don't know, let's say a 5-star general from the aviation, that there is something in a startup which might be of interest for him or for his department? Thanks.
Yes. This is difficult to achieve. It takes time. When I travel the world and travel the country, many of the audiences I meet, they want to skip exactly from where they are and they want to jump almost straight to where Austin is today. There are shortcuts. There are ways to accelerate. For sure, this is the case. As I described the Austin story that goes from the 1960s all the way to today, you can see some things that happened. I believe I have discovered and identified some ingredients to success to compress time and make all of that happen faster. But it can start small. And what happened with Capital Factory back in 2009 is we had some startups in Austin. They just didn't have a place where they all knew to go, where the investors knew to go, where the techies and the entrepreneurs could meet each other. So we created the destination. And at that time, there were enough angel investors that we could bring them in to help get the first flywheel going. In my lectures, I talk about getting the first flywheel. So you actually have to fast forward quite a bit of time until 2018, when the U.S. Army was looking to place a headquarters for their innovation units, and they decided on Austin. Part of their decision on Austin involved touring Capital Factory, and we got to show the 3-star general and the undersecretary of the Army what it would be like to plug into an ecosystem like this. So they got a taste of it. They got a feeling for it. But then the other thing that was really important for us is we, Capital Factory, have to prepare our startups for what it means to work with the Department of Defense. And part of this means there are many startups that are too early to engage. And we have to be the ones to tell them, I know you want to meet with a 3-star general. You are not ready. Your business is not ready. Your product is not ready. If we get you a meeting, we are going to lose credibility, and that 3-star general is no longer going to take our meetings. So then we have to say, but we have the resources to help you, startup founder, progress through the stages. We have mentors, we have advisors, we have very specific programs like our Defense Academy. And so we can work with them over 6 months or maybe even 2 years to help them accomplish the things that are necessary for them to be ready to go after that grant or that very first engagement. These are some of the things that we do.
Gordon, thank you for that answer. Thank you for the question. Those mentors, advisors, and programs that help you compress the time frame to allow other cities to do a similar thing to what Austin has done, are those available to international partner cities who are interested? Can we export the expertise that is here to somewhere like Bucharest in order for that time frame to be compressed?
Technically, for sure, it's possible. We do this across the state of Texas. Capital Factory was founded in Austin, and then we expanded to Dallas, Houston, and San Antonio. And so now we have founders, investors, customers, mentors, advisors throughout the state. We also recently did a partnership with Washington, D.C. because of our connections with Department of Defense and the U.S. federal government. So we will be expanding our mentorship to Washington, D.C., meaning our Texas mentors will be available to D.C. startups, and we will recruit new mentors in D.C. to make available to our Texas startups. There's no reason that could not also expand to Romania and other countries through very specific partnerships. But yes, if there were a formal relationship, this could happen like we have done across Texas and with Washington, D.C.
Well, that's
very good news.
Yes,
we
that's
can
very
confirm
exciting.
that is a very good news, and that's why we have official at the table to make sure that this could be formal, and we find a way to do it as soon as possible. And here in Bucharest, we are very eager to hear what Colonel Clay McVeigh has to say. He is the Deputy Director of Army Application Laboratory. He will be in Romania soon as well. I will give you all the information after the panel is closing. And now we are very eager to hear how the Army is doing this, because here in this part of the world is very difficult to imagine what Army Future Command is doing in Austin.
Thank you, Liliana. I'm excited to be here. This is a great opportunity. I hope to segue much with what Gordon offered. I work in the Army Applications Laboratory, which is part of Army Futures Command, as you just highlighted. I started here in 2019, the year after AFC really came to Austin. And I'll say, when I heard about what the Army was doing, I was excited to know that they were reaching out and trying to access the technology that had not yet entered into the Department of Defense. They were trying to work with small companies. And so I fought to get assigned to Army Futures Command in 2019. And little did I know the real organization I wanted to join was the one that I joined this past year at the Army Applications Laboratory. We have office space here in the Capitol Factory. We rent about a third of a floor within the Capitol Factory space. And our mission at the end of the day is to create capabilities that the warfighters can use immediately within their organizations, to create technologies that they can use. And I want to talk about barriers that companies that want to work with the Army have, and then maybe opportunities that the government can provide to break those barriers down. So the first one is that companies really don't have an easy way to access the government. The United States is a large bureaucratic organization. We have our very formal ways of trying to communicate appropriately, but very fairly with companies that want to work with us. But that process can often be complicated and misconstrued in how it works. So the Army in 2018 came to Austin, Texas to help break some of those barriers down. So we at the Army Applications Laboratory, we use all of the legal barriers, the legal bureaucracy that we have to, but we also create social media campaigns to highlight opportunities to companies that just don't know where to look to work with the government. We'll try and communicate with them on their terms. That's the reason that we're in the Capitol Factory. As we go heat up our lunch at the microwave, we can talk to companies as they're also heating up their lunch in the microwave. The Capitol Factory is kind enough to introduce companies to us that we think we might be interested in, and we share with them some of our priorities or the areas that we need help in. And so that relationship with the venture capitalist community is absolutely critical to help encourage companies to come work with the government. So that's one access that companies have issues with. The other access is the ability to actually talk to the customer. And that, in our case, is the soldiers. So if a company is going to come work on a problem with us, it needs to be absolutely imperative that that company has the opportunity to talk to the soldiers who are going to use the piece of equipment at the end of the day. They need to be able to quickly iterate and design and iterate and design and iterate to find the solution that will work in the environment that we're trying to make it work for. So one of the things we focus on within the Army Applications Laboratory is to create that relationship with a customer, with a soldier that can talk to an engineer who's going to provide the technology for the problem that they're trying to solve. So that's really the two things that we do to break down those barriers that small companies have or non-traditional defense companies have with working with the government. The other thing that Gordon highlighted is the opportunities for capital for funding that these companies need to have the runway to create the resources to be able to develop their products. So if a company works with the Army does not take equity in that company. We do not seek to own anything. We seek more or less to solve the problem. And so we can place companies on contract. We can provide them with funding, and then they can develop with that funding whatever product that they're working on ultimately to sell back to us. And so in some sense, although often it's hard to work with the large bureaucracy that is the Army, the fact that we can provide non-dilutive equity is pretty important to those companies. And then the last thing that we offer that is a barrier to the companies is the government can be very opaque with how it wants to work with these companies, on how it interacts with them. And so we, the Army Applications Laboratory, really try to establish as much transparency as we can. So if a company begins working with us, we have a formal process where we appropriate funds through the government that then allows us to actually go out and buy equipment. That process can take upwards of 3 years at best, and even longer for very complicated products that are getting designed. So when we meet with companies, or as we strive to communicate with what we're working on, we try to be very transparent on how long it is going to take for them to enter our acquisition processes, to be able to access funding, and then to be able to go out and procure, and at what rate and what quantity. And I think this gets down to what Gordon was saying about understanding that business model, understanding the timelines that are needed in order to become profitable, and what is necessary to create a business plan that is viable. So those are the barriers that companies face. Access to the government, access to soldiers, the customer, the capital problems that they have, and then the opaqueness that often occurs within the government. Opportunities is what we seek to do here in the Army Applications Lab as part of the Catapult Factory. Is we work to help solve problems, and from the get-go, we establish our institutional team to work on these problems. And that team will consist of the soldier, which is the warfighter at the end of the day, the customer who will use the product. It'll consist of engineers and scientists, those that can understand the technical aspects of the problem or the technology that will solve that problem. It will consist of the requirements writers, those individuals within the Army who will, at the end of the day, write exactly what is needed to solve these problems. And then fourth, we need a transition partner within the institutional Army that can help, once that technology is developed to an appropriate level, then move into the larger, more formal government processes that provides procurement and then the capability and fieldings in the soldiers' hands. So we establish these small teams. 4 skill sets are needed in that. And then they begin working what we call a solicitation, where we will write what we are asking the companies that want to work with us to solve. And we have found that less is more within these solicitations. If we can just accurately describe the problem and then maybe the conditions that the problem will be operating in, And then if we can publish that publicly, that's when we have the most return on investment for all the work that we've done. That's when companies can come in and give us solutions, proposed solutions. So in our space, in the Army Applications Laboratory, we'll issue these solicitations. We'll do a social media campaign push. We'll work with Twitter, the new X, Instagram, LinkedIn, and then we'll post it on the official U.S. government sites called sam.gov, and we'll work with companies as they write their proposals. We'll do webinars to help kind of coach them through what we're asking and help them develop proposals that will let us evaluate what they're proposing. So we'll do a down select through all those proposals. We'll pick the technologies and companies that we want to work with, and then we'll issue contracts. We've structured ourselves so that we can move upwards of $3.4 million onto a company in 90 days when we're moving fast, and then amounts of as much as $250,000 in as little as 30 days. Once we put these companies on contract, we then work with them hand in hand throughout the period of performance where they're developing their products. We take the companies to the field. We put them in the field with soldiers, and we have soldiers describe what they're facing. And then we repeat that process throughout their period of performance as the companies develop their products so that they can iterate and develop the best design that's for them. So the second thing, the other opportunity I'll have is just like if you describe the problem in vague terms, but clear enough that companies have the ability to see what we're facing, we often get proposals that mutually support each other to solve those problems. And so when you're reviewing these proposals, you look at them and you're like, I really like this technology, and this company's really good in this area. But when paired with this other proposal, the two of these companies can work together and really generate what we call a best in class with all of the subsystems for different products. So we develop what we call cohorts. Often when we select companies that we want to work for, we look to leverage each company's respective strengths so that the finished product that gets designed is of most value to the government. And then the last thing I'll offer in opportunities is you can't just, as a government, issue contracts, expect innovation to occur. You really do have to shepherd the relationship between the customer and the company as they work through their development process. There is no one path that allows customers to receive technology. Each project has its own path on how it transitions into the warfighter's hands. So one of the things that we do in the Army Applications Lab is we're relatively small in comparison to the other Department of Defense innovation organizations, but we really try to create a good relationship with the customers and then with the companies that are working with those products.
Thank you, Colonel McVeigh. One question I would have is, how do you go about prioritizing what problems you are wanting to address? And then how do you go through and select appropriate companies that go with that problem? You mentioned cohorts, and that was very interesting, pairing companies together for their strengths and getting after various problems. But how do you start with the problem list to begin with?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we obviously fall under a higher headquarters. So we have a 4-star general who's our boss, and he can tell us, I want you to work on this problem. And we salute, yes, sir, and we work on that problem. But that's not the only way. We've had units reach out to us directly and say, hey, we have been doing, and I'll use an example, forward arming and refueling points. The way that we do that has not changed in 80 years. FARP operations are what we call them. It's when helicopters land, they need to get refueled quickly, rearmed so that they can go back and enter the fight. Now that we have an environment where UAS technologies are proliferated across the whole battle space, these aircrafts, when conducting refueling operations, are at risk, obviously for reconnaissance, and then they can be targeted from there. And so a commander came to us and said, hey, can you help me do my forward arming and refueling process operations faster. And so we wrote a solicitation. We just described what I just more or less said, posted it to industry, and we got a plethora of proposals on how we could do that faster. We ended up picking 2 companies that are providing 2 different technologies to work with us. One is developing just basically a faster fuel pump. And the other one is going to develop a little robotic system that can help deliver refueling operations, and then scatter back into a concealed position. But, a simple solution is a faster fuel pump. Maybe you can cut down by 1/3 or half the amount of time that it takes to fuel helicopters while they're most vulnerable. So that was another way. We get input from our senior leaders. We get input from unit commanders. I have an example where we were in the field and a soldier approached us and said, hey, soldiers, when they get a little bit of money and they have a barracks room and their food's paid for, they spend their money on cars, right? Cars and large screen TVs. So soldiers drive nice cars in comparison to the rest of us often. And this soldier came up to us and said, hey, I took my Audi into the dealership to get serviced the other day. And the mechanics put on a little headset, and through augmented reality, they were able to quickly diagnose the problems that my car was facing. Why can't I do that? And he was obviously a maintainer within the Army, and said, you're right. And he goes, and why do I have to fill out a piece of paper that I have to rely on someone to interpret what I write to fix and order the appropriate parts? And so we took a look at the problem that we face with how we do maintenance in the field. And again, we wrote a solicitation. And one of the things that we're working on now is leveraging the technology that the automotive industry has started using into the United States Army with augmented reality and maintainer support.
Perfect.
Thank you, Colonel. Any questions from the Bucharest side?
We got very inspired about your presentation in details about the ecosystem, and I hope all the companies here present in the panel or not are more courageous to switch and enter in the defense and security industry. And for that, we have our minister that wants to deliver a statement to encourage them much more for that.
Thank you. I have seen. I was listening to your ecosystem, and of course, it is let's say slightly different than what we were considering. And I'd like to give you a little bit some idea how you're thinking. Let's say this to develop this defense industry. It was clear that in the last 30 years, not much has been done. And also the budgets which were allocated to the Ministry of Defense, they were not enough, they were not sufficient in order to give it a boost to this defense industry. It happened also something else. Last year, we replaced the offset law, which we had in place from 2004, with a different law, which was encouraging the industrial cooperation in the defense industry. And you will see it a little bit in the strategy for defense industry, which is also currently, let's say, under review. That we had the intention to create a structure which is a little bit similar with what you have in the United States, called DSCA, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, a structure for industrial cooperation in the, let's say, in the defense industry, with 6 main pillars covering the needs of the Ministry of Defense. Behind that, the specification from the Ministry of Defense, which is included in a which normally is included in a government decision, and it goes to the Parliament to be voted, is always including something which specify the involvement of domestic industry. That for some specific areas, the domestic industry cooperation should be included. which is pushing in a way the partner who is going to provide the product to the Ministry of Defense to go in discussion on industrial cooperation with the Romanian partner, and that is boosting in a way that thing. I was also including something else, but okay, this is a debate which should and an agreement which should be made with the Ministry of Defense, that part of the 2.5%, which is allocated from GDP, which is allocated to the Ministry of Defense, to be also allocated to the defense industry, which would mean that that would be enough budget for startups, for projects which might be developed together. There is also, let's say, there are also the projects which are included in the research at the Ministry of Research and Research and Innovation. And part of them, they are also related to the defense. And those are the money which are allocated from the state budget for these companies. But it has to be something more. And I do see that is going with industrial cooperation, allocating a part of the GDP of this budget for defense industry for this type of projects. And the third thing is the access to funding, because you know very well that till the war started in Ukraine, most of the banks they were not even considering to finance businesses in the defense sector. And now we see that, let's say, things happens, and we need to have, let's say, possibility for these companies to be funded. And that is also another aspect which the state and Romania is considering to, let's say, to get involved in, using the banking system, the Romanian banking system, or the other incentives we might have as a guarantee funds for those companies. Thank you.
I hope these are great news and we pave the avenue to cooperate much more in concrete projects. And I think I saw a hand raised here in the room. Yes, please, General.
Hello, and thank you so much for letting us know how great things are doing here in the Lone Star State. And also we are having not very happy time. We can say that we are living a perilous time right now, and we saw after COVID and all the wars around us how easy it is to kill the supply chain. Speaking about the supply chain, do you have at the level of state taxes and implicit of capital factory thinking about how we can create a more reliable and a strong supply chain, and that include also investment in the production in Romania or other countries? Thank you.
Thank you, General. Panelists, any thoughts on supply chain and projects you have worked on in the past?
We have, at Capital Factory, we have lots of startups working on supply chain for both the commercial and Department of Defense sectors. It's anything from additive manufacturing and 3D printing technology to allow rapid prototyping and small-scale manufacturing of certain items that could be needed. It's artificial intelligence for real-time assessment of needs and optimizing what is built and where it is shipped. It's things like robotics, including humanoid robotics, replacing a dramatic shortage of workers in the supply chain, even just warehouse workers. In the US alone, there is a shortage of 2 million workers just working in warehouses, moving boxes and totes from one place to the other. So I'm on the board of directors of one of the world's most advanced humanoid robotics companies. They actually have a partnership with Mercedes to be working in Romania, in Mercedes plant in Romania. That was the first announcement. The robot was there. So it goes across all of the elements of the supply chain, of course, autonomous trucking and for the delivery of the items and things. Yeah, there are many startups working on supply chain. The Colonel can tell us how much of that applies to Department of Defense, but yes, it exists.
Yeah, so I have thoughts, and I think there is no one solution to the supply chain problem. I think it needs to be at least two parts. Industry has a role, and I think the government has a role. If there's a path where there is a financial incentive for industry to fix the supply chain problem, then that needs to be a problem that industry solves, and I think the government needs to let them do that. If there is no path, then I think it's clearly in the government's side that it needs to fix that problem, because that will benefit everyone on a whole.
So it sounds like from our panelists that there's a lot of innovation between the government and private industry if those parties are enabled and empowered and funded to make those steps into solving that problem. So thank you, panelists, for that response. Back to you, Liliana.
Thank you. Now we will go in another part, and we will talk about how innovation is done here in Europe, but of course in transatlantic community extended. And I will invite our friend Emma Ryan from the NATO Diana. She is a challenger manager, so the name is very interesting. Yeah, your position is, I envy you, to present how this program is working for NATO community.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for that introduction. We work in a very similar way to our colleagues over in America, although I don't have to salute my boss, I have to say. So who in the room has heard of Diana? Wonderful. Well, I hope by the end of my presentation, you'll all know a bit more about Diana. Diana is an accelerator program based on, inspired by those we've heard about in America. Its main aim is to locate and accelerate dual-use innovation. And I'm just going to explain a little bit more about what that means, why that's important, and how we're going to achieve that. So those of you who are not familiar with the term dual-use, it means it has applications in both military and civilian. Innovation, I think we all know what that means. We have innovation in our pockets. Our phones are very innovative. I'm able to use my phone to take a photo of a Romanian menu, and it translates it to English for me, which I just think is absolutely amazing and also very useful for me because unfortunately I don't speak any Romanian and would quite like some dinner. So in terms of why dual use is important, well, there's a number of reasons, but it's all around kind of the forum purpose of resilience. Not only do we want NATO allies to be resilient using these innovative solutions, but we also want the startups, although we use the term innovators instead. The reason we use this phrase is they may not be startups, but they may be startups in the defense industry, in the defense and security market. So they may have been a commercial company that has existed for 30, 50, 100 years, but they've never worked in the defense market. Hence, they can be considered a startup in that market. So I just wanted to make the clarification there that we are not looking necessarily at young companies. We are looking at a whole range of companies to deliver us solutions. Now, we aim for dual use because it allows these companies to be resilient. Startups, our innovators, work in a very different way, and they cannot always depend on defense. If they did depend on defense, they may not be resilient, and it may cause them to fail before they've even started. By targeting dual-use applications, they can go for both the commercial market and the defense market, and when the defense market isn't necessarily there, they also have commercial opportunities as well, increasing their resilience, allowing them to survive, and allowing them to become profitable. I'm now going to explain how we do this. So we do this, I'm going to give an overview of the various steps, and then go into detail of those steps. So we start with what is known as the strategic direction. So it's a bit of a mouthful. It comes from our board of directors, which is made up of 32 representatives from all allied nations. And the strategic direction sums up their needs, their requirements, the problems they're facing, And we then use that to define our challenge statements. And that's where my job title comes from as challenge manager. Although I have to say, I don't manage challenges, I manage solutions for challenges. And what challenges are just problems that are experienced in defence and security by all ally nations. Now, those of you that have worked with stakeholders before, I'm sure you realise how challenging it is. Try and work with 32 from different countries. It's a whole nother level of complex, I have to say. But they're able to agree on the strategic direction. We then use that to base our challenge statements on. In the first year of running the Diana programme, we had 3 challenge statements: energy resilience, secure information sharing, and energy and power, and sensing and surveillance. This year, we've had 5 challenge statements covering 5 different challenges, which I'll come on to. And in steady state, which should start from next year and go on, I hope, for a very, very long time, we're going to have up to 10 challenges, 10 challenge statements covering those problems in the strategic direction. But we don't just define our challenge statements on that document for the board of directors. We also look for inputs from a number of different stakeholders. This is, as you mentioned, warfighters, so straight from the front line. We want to know what problems they're having and give them augmented reality if they need it. We also look to security companies. We look to everyday civilians who may encounter issues. And we also look to commercial stakeholders as well to help us define those challenge statements. We look at various different sources from NATO itself, using the Science and Technology Office, who help, as was mentioned yesterday by our speakers, weak signals. And what this means is we're essentially trying to predict the future. We're not only trying to be resilient against current threats, both person-made and natural, such as climate change, but also future threats. We're really looking for those innovative solutions that look to solve future problems. And that's what resilience is all about. Not only being prepared for current problems, but also future problems as well. So we look to a number of different sources for ideas about what those problems might be and the weak signals we're seeing. Following development of the challenge statement, we then open it up to the public for our innovators to apply to the programme. Our first year, we had 1,300 innovators, which was about 10 times what we were expecting. And this year, we've had over double that. So it's a very competitive programme, and we tend to pick around 15 innovators per challenge area. Originally, it was 10, but because we got so many applicants and because of the high quality of the applicants, we extended that to 15. We then have a down selection process, similar to what was previously mentioned. And one thing I would just like to mention here is that Romania was a huge asset in that selection process, and many of our evaluators were Romanian. So thank you very much for that. Following the selection process, we then down select, as I said, to that 15 organisations, 15 companies per challenge area, and they then enter what's known as the acceleration programme. So we have phase 1 and phase 2. Now, phase 1 is around 100,000 euro, and that's for a number of different things. One, to engage with end users. And what I mean here by end users is the military, the defence and security customers. So that's what we mean by end users. The money can also be used to fund any testing and any validation. And as part of Diana, innovators have access to over 200 test centres, 2 of which are here in Bucharest, which we're also very happy about. And those test centres not only allow you to develop your technology and test the performance, but also validate it in an operational field, which is very important if you want to get it on the market. The second phase really helps you to commercialise and scale up your solution, and that's around 300,000 euro. Now, what I'd like to clarify here is, compared to initiatives in America, we understand this is not a huge amount of funding, particularly, say, if you're developing something for space, which takes millions. However, Diana doesn't just provide funding. It provides access to end users. It provides access to understanding the NATO procurement process and the defence procurement process. Those in the audience that have experience with that, that's invaluable, really. I'm sure everyone knows how complicated and difficult it is. The other advantage that the Diana programme gives is, I'm not going to say fast track, but rapid acquisition. So procurement in defence typically takes a very long time. But startups aren't working at that speed, neither is innovation, and neither are the challenges and conflict that we are currently seeing. So Diana,
for encouraging the companies to go and to do a project in research and development. But I think the huge problem that Europe has, Romania is in this situation, we do not have money. So investment funds are not very developed, or they do not have a huge appetite to invest in defense and security projects. And I think this is crucial for us to learn from the United States how you convince investors to invest in this, and as well, because we do not have time to build this ecosystem of investors, we are looking your advice, your help, how to bring US investors here in Europe and in Romania. So Aaron, this is my big problem. Can we solve it?
So if I can repeat what I think you said, we want to help Romania bring U.S. investors to Romania to help build the defense tech ecosystem there. Is that your question?
Yes, and if your panelist answers will be as simple as my question, we will be very happy.
So, Colonel McVeigh, you've talked often about problem sets being brought to you and then fielding these out. If I were to turn our panelists into problem solvers right now and present this problem, how do we get our ecosystem, or how do we get our pool of investors interested in investing in something outside of the United States, which I don't think that has been an area of focus really for Austin. But we are seeing more and more partner nations come into Austin and be interested in what we're doing here. How do we garner, and this is open to anyone, garner interest and help direct that interest into obviously part of the world that is experiencing a great need for innovation, rapid transformation, which benefits us all in the West. Anyone on the panel? Yeah, Gordon, you want to start?
This is a difficult answer, but I'm gonna tell you my honest belief. Investors go where the great opportunities are. It is a competitive market, even around Texas or around the U.S. So Romania would need to convince an American investor, whether that's an angel investor or a venture capital fund, that the opportunities in Romania are equal or probably better than their options to invest here in the U.S. This could happen. The Romanian government might choose some special incentives, for example. And if I'm going to invest in a startup and I know that my $1 million is going to be matched by a government grant of $1 million, the government has now lowered the risk on my $1 million investment. My $1 million into an American company has a certain risk reward profile, but because I invest $1 million into a Romanian company that the government gives them another $1 million, my risk reward calculation is a little bit different. This is an example. Maybe there's some things about taxation. As an American investor, I have no idea what it means to invest in a Romanian company. So I might not even do that because I don't know what's going to happen when that 1 million turns into 10 million. Do I owe taxes in Romania? How much taxes? I don't have accountants there. I don't have lawyers there. The Romanian government needs to explain to me as a venture capitalist what it means when I have a failure. Can I write that off? What does it mean when I have a success? This is a big challenge. This is not going to be easy, but I could see some potential paths to get some things started.
No, that's great. And my expertise in Eastern Europe, spanning the last several decades, I see this as well. What Gordon is sort of painting, sort of the the hesitancy of American companies to do business in Eastern Europe because of the unknowns. So if Romania is wanting to attract these investors, as Gordon said, a shared burden, we call it skin in the game, of mutual investment into this problem set, but also the taxation benefits. It's not very clear to American investors who are, American centric a lot of times, to what is the incentive to get us to take upon this extra unknown, this extra risk to the capital that this investor would bring forward. So I think that the gauntlet has sort of been thrown back to Romania to paint a picture of a stable and worthwhile business environment that would make it more attractive to American investors. And Clay, you had a few thoughts, is that correct?
Yeah, I'll offer a thought on an opportunity that we're struggling with here in the United States. Is many companies that want to go into the field and test some of their equipment struggle to do that testing on, approved installations that can provide data back to the companies that are working it. And so often we've said, hey, you may want to look international to see if you can find a place to go fly these aircraft, test this lethal product that you're making to collect your data. So that might be an opportunity that you can capitalize on.
And I think from the April visit, we do have at least one company that is interested in coming to Romania to test and demonstrate some of its capabilities. So forums like this are great for building those relationships. I know there's been several companies that have visited Romania since the April delegation visit to Texas. So back and forth, these exchanges and these relationships building, I think is perfect time for Romania to showcase its not only need but opportunity that exists in Romania that would attract American investors. So thank you, Lily.
Yes, thank you. So we will have such kind of test in April next year, and we will use all your recommendation and ideas that you can deliver, or maybe we will discover talking and having this kind of dialogues much more in the future. Now I want to ask if there are any question in the room. If not, we will go to the, we have here a question.
Just a short question for Clay. You mentioned that you have different programs. So my question, I think we discussed this in April, but I'm not sure what was the answer. Do you have programs that finance non-US companies or companies that are recently open in Austin or something there?
That's a great question. Some of our funding can go to international partners, but not all of it. So we have to make a good business case on why we would do that. But to answer to your question is yes, it could happen.
Okay, thank you.
So now we can move to the next speaker, and Aaron, I will ask you to present him.
Thanks, Liliana. One of our main hosts for the Romanian delegation, along with the Capital Factory, was Amatrine. It is a company based just north of Austin in Round Rock, Texas, and we're joined by Brandon Cates, the CEO of Amatrine Incorporated, and someone we've worked closely with over the last year, and love to get his perspective on the thoughts that have already been shared. We're sort of moving down the panel from the Capital Factory to U.S. Army Applications Laboratory to now a private company that is integrated into the defense tech ecosystem here in Austin, and would love to get your thoughts on how your private sector company collaborates with the U.S. Army, with U.S. military, and builds this public-private partnership in the U.S. defense sector.
Well, good evening. Thanks for having us. Good to see you, Liliana, and the team over there. I think one of the things that I wanted to express was a little bit of a history lesson to start and to set the context for the innovation that's happened, especially here in Austin over the past 10 years or so. My experience with defense innovation started really when I was a warfighter in a special operations unit, and we were the recipient of all the defense innovation that had happened for the prior 10 years. But as the recipient of it, I didn't really know the industry that created it. And back then, access to defense innovation was really through DARPA and traditional acquisition paths. Really, prior to 9/11, it was a very rigorous process, but it was very isolated and small. And what DARPA is the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency. They're the ones who claim to have created the internet long before Al Gore said he did. But that was the only innovation unit really defined as an innovation organization inside of the Department of Defense. You had traditional acquisition pathways for large defense primes, but you didn't really have anybody catering to two engineers in a garage with an interesting idea. After 9/11 and the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq started, the Army stood up the Rapid Equipping Force, which really wasn't necessarily for innovation as much as it was to recognize that there was innovation going on out there in industry and they wanted to rapidly acquire it. So now today, you have, I don't know, 36 maybe different innovation organizations that have innovation somewhere in their word or in their title. You've got DIUX was one of the first organizations, Defense Innovation Unit, experimental, and then they dropped the X. And then because that was at the Defense Department level, the Navy created one, Special Operations Command created one, Air Force created one with similar construct. You had the Rapid Capabilities Office. You have now inside the services, the Marine Corps stood up an innovation organization. 18th Airborne Corps, which is a core level asset inside the Army, stood up a company for innovation. So the reason I bring this up is because I assume the team in Bucharest is somewhere on this continuum from where I was at 9/11 when I was experiencing defense innovation at the warfighter level to where we are today here in Austin with Army Futures Command. And they're just one of many in the defense space that are providing an innovation pathway for industry. The reason I bring it up is a little bit of a cautionary tale because we're talking about trying to, and it ties in to some of the conversation earlier that Gordon mentioned, we're trying to cater to the two engineers with a garage with an idea, a unique idea. But it's a little overwhelming for them a lot of times. And that's why you have to have those mentors. You have to have a clear communication strategy on how you're going to communicate these innovation concepts and innovation access portals to folks. I was here at Fed Supernova this past August and I got stuck in an elevator, went up and down a couple times, and I was with a woman who was an emergency room doctor out in California. And she had come up with a unique technology around blood pressure monitoring. And she had no idea how to get it into the Defense Department. But somebody had told her that this would be a unique thing and a good thing for soldiers. And as she started exploring, she was the one who felt somewhat exacerbated. She said, I just don't know where to go. I'm here at Fed Supernova to try to help navigate. Should I submit a proposal to these 40 different organizations or should I just focus on one? I think that's the thing that we as folks who care about this ecosystem have to be aware of, that if you're a solo entrepreneur or a small team, it's overwhelming.
So I like the vignette about the lady who has an innovative technology and she's trying to enter this space. Your company has entered this space, recreating what was in Israel. Company started in Israel and then stood up a sister company or under the parent company here in the United States. What best practices and maybe issues did you face with having this technology, this product, and then how did you go about taking those first steps into this ecosystem? What best practices would you recommend, and what problems did you find and encounter along the way? Sort of give us that sort of shepherding for this lady in the elevator based upon your lessons learned.
That's a great question. And it ties into the conversation just a minute ago about supply chain, as well as trying to bring investors to Romania. One of the things I was going to mention about the investors to Romania, just as a slight tangent, is I think most U.S. investors would only be interested in investing in a Romanian defense tech company if that defense tech company had a path to the United States defense market. That's what our investors said. Our investors, primary investors, are Israeli. And when they invested in the company in Israel, their first comment was, "You're going to the United States." And that's how I got involved. Because it's the largest defense market. And there are those innovation pathways that are all over the place. So you can really spread your innovation efforts across multiple domains. I think the other headwind, I guess, we hit was our technology, at least a portion of our technology, is governed by this thing called the Berry Amendment. And I suspect a lot of NATO countries have something similar. But the Berry Amendment was, I think, founded in 1941. And it was part of a kind of Make America or Made in America supply chain protection concept, really. And one of our technologies is the textile-based technology. So anything that touches a soldier, Marine, sailor, airman has to be manufactured in the United States. And that's everything from the threads and the buttons and the zippers all the way to any treatments that are applied to it and the cutting and sewing. And that industry, specifically I'll talk about the cut and sew industry or the textile industry as a component, is not a robust industry in the United States, right? Most of that kind of work for the commercial industry has gone overseas, to China, to Pakistan, Vietnam. And so in order to bring innovation into those industries that are governed by the Berry Amendment, you really have to, you're kind of rowing upstream because they've been doing stuff the same way for years and years and years. And so when you bring a disruptive technology into a legacy industry, you're going to run into a lot of resistance. You're going to run into a lot of folks who are like, well, why do you care about this level of quality? Well, because this is a life-saving technology that's going to go on a soldier. Everything else you produce is for Lululemon and yoga pants, and maybe that doesn't matter. But for us, it does matter. And so you're battling a lot of institutional inertia.
So Liliana, any questions from the Bucharest side?
Of course, there's a line of questions. So I will invite now a tech company to address a question by the CEO, Alin Gheran.
Hello. So I have two questions for our esteemed guest from America. One is related with Capital Factory. It's a business-oriented one. If you could tell me what is the level of business freedom once getting into the Capital Factory defense ecosystem? Can a business go on the free market easily or will be stuck with the defense sector once the business will grow? And the second one, it's kind of related with the first one. How about the intellectual property and technology ownership over time?
So the second question is in regard to protecting intellectual property. Is that correct?
Yes, sort of. Let's say if a certain business will develop a new technology together with Capital Factory in deep tech, let's say, like brain-computer interface, which is a strategic technology for the future, will it remain with the business company ownership or will be transferred to the defense sector being a new technology?
Thank you for those questions. And maybe we'll go backwards in addressing those two questions. Protecting IP, Colonel McVeigh, you mentioned early on that the Army does not, correct me if I'm wrong, does not retain that IP, but allows sort of a process where the Army has a right to acquire the products, but it does not take the IP itself. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, so each case would be its own discussion, but generally, I can speak for the Army Applications Laboratory. We don't seek to procure any IP. We see it as an opportunity that companies can refine their product and then they keep their IP. if that does come up, often the Army wants to develop a product and then have the freedom to be able to change vendors on who's working that product. But that's negotiated long before companies are ever placed on contract and work with us. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Brandon, you had some thoughts?
Well, the one thing I'd say about the during the proposal negotiation process, there's always a rights discussion. There's a table, government purpose rights versus general use rights, and it's a negotiation with a contracting officer in every scenario. The thing I would say also is that very rarely are you building something that's just you. I think in most defense applications, there's some sort of integration effort, right? I make a widget, that widget goes in a radio. Now I'm dealing with IP that I've created along with the radio manufacturer. Those conversations are extremely important to get right first time. And so as much as I don't want to offend any lawyers in the room, you're going to have to pay a bunch of money to lawyers here in the United States to navigate that space.
And then going backwards to question one, Gordon, maybe business freedom and what does that look like about, I imagine it's a similar negotiation, you know? How does this company go about retaining its own autonomy versus giving that over to a third party? Can you speak to that?
Yeah, one thing that's important to understand about Capital Factory is we are advisors and we are investors. Sometimes we're only an advisor. We never invest in the company. This is a startup that is in the idea stage. They come to work from Capital Factory, from our co-working space. They want access to mentors. They want access to a community of other startups. And in that case, we are just an advisor. We can't tell them what to do. We have no control. We might suggest some things, but they are completely running their business. It happens sometimes we also invest in the startups, but even then we are a minor investor. We get a very small amount of ownership in the company. And so we can't really force the company to do anything. We get to vote on certain things along with other investors. So if the company wants to do something crazy or they want to get acquired, yes, we might have a vote, but this is a very standard process in the US. Companies are used to having ownership by some investors, and Capital Factory would just be one line item on that list of investors. And so even if we're an investor, mostly we're also an advisor. So there is a lot of freedom. We don't end up owning any of the intellectual property. It is 100% owned by our startups, even if we're an investor. So they have, let's say, almost infinite freedom because of the relationship with us to run the company how they want.
Well, thank you for that. And I wanted to quickly paint a picture of where we're sitting right now, because that may not be apparent or clear to our friends in Bucharest. We are sitting in one of the many conversation spaces within the Capital Factory, which is located in a high-rise hotel downtown Austin. If you go to many military facilities, they're often gated, closed off, not accessible. But anyone off the street can walk into this hotel and then approach a Capital Factory desk and say, hey, I want to engage at some level. And then as Gordon mentioned, that level of involvement with the Capital Factory is really defined between the two parties. And then the IP, sounds like the very same thing. You know, we have to go through lots of lawyers and the process, but really it's accessible to anyone. So I wanted to paint that picture of sort of openness and collaboration that the Capital Factory and the Department of Defense has fostered here that allows that innovation and that spirit of collaboration to really thrive. So looking forward to the next question.
Thank you, Aaron. I think you explained very well the motive that I consider that Capital Factory should be involved in this conversation that we have here at the Euro-Atlantic Resilience Forum, which is a very important forum from Romania. And we had many panels, and tomorrow we will have as well with cities like Paris, Londra, Tokyo, and so on. And of course, now I will give the floor to the next question, please.
Thank you. So my name is Paul Mândraș. I'm from the Resilience Center. First of all, congratulations for all the detailed aspects you have explained to us. It's really interesting. And Mr. Gordon did mention at the beginning of his presentation that the search for talent is a basic element of any defense startup. So my question is if he could elaborate on methods to find those talents and to retain those talents within the business, especially because such a defense ecosystem is focused on both sides, if I may say, on the startup side and on the defense ministry side to retain those talents. So please, please elaborate if possible. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, talent is obviously very important to building a great company. There's one fundamental about retaining talent is the talent that's working for your company has to be excited about the company, excited about the vision, engaged in their role. So this is just a fundamental of working for any company. It's not about compensation. In my experience, when an employee says, they'll only stay at the company if I give them a 10% pay raise. Actually, I know that as soon as I give them the pay raise, in 3 months or 6 months, they're going to be asking for another pay raise. Startups find talent from a few different places. They find them coming out of the universities. This is partly because startups are not able to afford to pay full salaries. They can only pay partial salaries. So we need young workers that don't need big salaries. And instead of that, we are compensating them with a small amount of ownership in the company. This is the same case with the executives. When we hire executive talent into startups, they do not get full salaries. They get very small salaries because they get some ownership in the company. This means that they have a potential to make a lot of money if the company is successful. So another ingredient to retaining the talent is to remain on a successful path. If the talent that is compensated with a low salary and instead they're getting equity, they need to always see the potential for that equity to reward them in the future. The other source of talent comes from a natural evolution of the startup ecosystem. Most startups fail. They crash and burn because something didn't work out. So there is a 5-person startup or a 20-person startup or a 100-employee startup that fails. Many of the talent from those startups are going to recycle back into the ecosystem. So one of the roles that Capital Factory has is I know the moment that a startup is going to fail because they are in our portfolio, and I'm going to help the best talent go find the other startups in our portfolio that are doing extremely well.
Do you have something, Brandon?
Well, I was just going to mention a plug for a Department of Defense program called SkillBridge here in the United States, which is an internship program in the last 6 months of a service member's career, whatever branch they're in, where they can go out and work and really in the industry. It doesn't have to be in the defense industry. A lot of them do land in the defense industry because it's what they're comfortable with. But I think having, to Gordon's point about having a mission and having a purpose as well as success and momentum of success is really important. Our company is mostly veterans. I'd say probably 70% of the employees inside our company are veterans in some form, in some service. And that allows them to quickly adopt to our mission of supporting the warfighter. We're not a dual-use technology, and so, or at least not yet. So I think we have a unique situation where it's a little bit different, where we would have a preference for bringing veterans on just because they get the mission. But it is a nice way to tap into veterans through that SkillBridge program. And if Romania has something similar, that's a great head start.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. Any other questions from Bucharest?
Yes, I want to thank Brandon that mentioned that you have these veterans that are included after they finished their mission in DOD, which I found amazing, and I hope Romania will look at this and as well replied because we need to have that kind of expertise still used and not being lost. And before giving the floor to the last speaker of this panel, I will invite Colonel Grosaru to address a question.
Thank you, Liliana. Hello, everybody. Hello there in Austin. Aaron, Brandon, Clay, Gordon, it's again a great pleasure meeting you. I have a short comment and also one question, let's say, for entire audience. Gordon, you lifted the ball to the net in your speech at the beginning of this session, telling us about the existence of 3 pillars for any startup. I named here money, customers, and resources. Am I right? Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. So we have to have a starting point talking about the resilience for any organization. And we have to establish the starting point at the time zero, establishing the resources. And I am talking about 4 out of 4 resources for any organization. First, human resources, continued with information resources, logistics, and last but not the least, financial resources. So, as you noticed, I placed the human resources on the first level, on a purpose. Why? Because the human resources is the most important resource in any organization. At the end of the day, there is no organization without people. In this respect, my question for the entire audience, as I said, is the following. Is the education and training a solution or the solution to create a foundation, a stable foundation of the building resilience process or not? And another question, a short question, what can we do to permanently rise or update the level of education in order to keep the rhythm with the tech growing? Thank you.
So Aaron, take the question about how we can optimize the educational system to keep the pace with the evolution in high tech.
It's a hard quiz.
Sorry, I have a few thoughts here. So I see 2 competing parts here. You want it quick, and you want it well. Yeah, and I don't know that you can necessarily have both. I think education is absolutely the path that puts you on the track to be able to build an innovation ecosystem that is thriving. In addition to the infrastructure that I think a government needs to make into its like we were talking about a company or a country before this started earlier, that the government had made a large investment into its IT infrastructure that it was just now starting to see the benefits from decades prior. And I think education is certainly one of those things that it can do. I had friends come over to the house this past weekend who live in Hawaii, solely because they heard that there was a specific school that they wanted to send their kids to here in Austin, Texas, that seeks to build innovators. I was kind of floored that they would make the trek from Hawaii to Austin, Texas to consider sending their kids to this school. But I mean, their oldest was 14 years old, and they're looking at creating the mindset that you can do anything you can if you set your mind to it. You can start working now. So I think education is absolutely important.
Yeah, I have another thought. I'll tell you that the United States university system is not preparing entrepreneurs to successfully start a startup. If someone that's young wants to start a startup, going and getting a 4-year degree and an MBA actually is not the best path. You learn to build a startup by doing a startup. There are foundational things that you can and should learn. Absolutely. The university that Clay's referring to, I believe, is one that has incorporated entrepreneurship into the curriculum. So the young students are learning and doing at the same time. This is the best combination. Starting and growing a startup, there are fundamentals that can be taught. I have an academy I call Founders Academy. I run it in a boot camp. I have an online curriculum. I have 50 lectures. But the audience I'm teaching to are founders that are working on the startup. So I am teaching them things that they need to know right then or in the next few months. And so there is education that can be applied to building a startup, but it has to be done in a certain way. It cannot just be theoretical. You don't just learn it out of a textbook and then go do it. It's learn and do at the same time.
Gordon, I really liked what you said earlier about an employee asking for a 10% pay raise is not going to keep that employee there, but it is the inherent acceptance and the culture within that organization that a employee feels a part of, and that equity that may be realized in the future is really what drives us forward. And just on a personal note, part of this relationship between myself and the members in Bucharest right now is just based upon a realization that good, like-minded people need to work together to do good things. Whether it is a lucrative thing or not is another question altogether. But that, I think, is the same spirit that you were expressing about how do we go about retaining the talent, growing the talent. And I would like to remark that there were other cities in the calculus for when Army Futures Command was going to be placed here. And one of the things that attracted the Army to placing a 4-star headquarters in Austin was the hospitality and the innovation that was already existing. I'm not sure that the Army would have made that same decision had those two elements been not present. So, Colonel Grisaro, I appreciate your question, but I think that at some level that that spirit of innovation and supporting that innovation has to already be present in order for that seed to germinate and to grow in Bucharest. And I have seen that myself, and I've seen that with the folks that are present in that room in Bucharest now. So I see good things ahead, and we have a lot of expertise here and as well in Bucharest that we would love to continue the collaboration and learn back and forth from each other.
Thank you, Aaron. Now, because we want to, you in United States, I want to understand better Romania, I will invite the CEO of a company that is doing research and development in defense industry here in Romania to talk about his experience and how it is to be a tech company in Romania in this time, and not only because he has already some years of experience.
Thank you, Liana. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. My name is Emmanuel Pop, and I lead a Romanian R&D company, Autonomous Flight Technology, whose sole vision since its establishment in 2004 was to develop the capability and technical skills necessary for the local development of armament system, for Romanian development of armament system. So, may I say for Mr. Gordon, I'm a huge opportunity, in fact. We have 20 years of experience on this path, and along the way we have the opportunity to work on projects that have brought us immense satisfaction. 20 years ago, we started developing off-target drone for Romanian Army. This has been used almost continuously for over 15 years in a training exercise with anti-aircraft artillery or ground-to-air missiles. We continued with the development of Class 1 UAV systems with takeoff weight between 9 and up to 150 kilograms, and have begun past year to develop an UAV system with a takeoff weight around 1,000 kilograms. We have strong competences in software, electronics, mechanicals, and evidently in composite material technology. We are unusually vertically organized. We develop and produce the aircraft in-house, and as far as possible, we also try to develop the onboard equipment in terms of hardware and software. We are a small team of engineers, introverted, with low social skills, clearly the stereotypical nerds. Some years ago, we had to implement an interoperability standard. A young, very competent software engineer asked me what a STANAG is. I replied, this is a NATO standard. I'm not very sure that he completely knows what NATO is. But despite this, together with him, we did a great job in the implementation of these STANAG standards. Now, even this day, I told my colleagues about Diana program. And they replied, this lady Diana is beautiful. Anyway, I feel honored every day to be part of this team of specialists. We talk about the fact that the war in the Europe, it's at the Europe doorsteps. I heard it clearly stated yesterday in the official opening of the Euro-Atlantic Resilience Forum that Ukraine has bought us time. It has already bought us almost 3 years. I don't have the right because I can't have an overview from my level, but I still want to ask, have we done anything with this time? Have we done anything with this time? Here is a small company in a country on the eastern border of the European Union, not so much is visible. For example, in the way an R&D project are evaluated and the R&D funds is allocated, nothing has changed. I don't want to be ungrateful because there is an increase in volume, and I really want to address my appreciation to the Romanian Army, very good initiative to outsource some of their research projects. What I want to criticize is the method of evaluation and allocation of these R&D funds. This method is still based on old conventions. These conventions, in these conventions, the weight of scientific research is still high. And the weight of the purely bureaucratic parts is also very high. There are paper and no real product. A lot of effort goes to paper and products are on paper only. Too much effort into making reports about what we done to the detriment of what we actually doing. Also, we are forcing these projects funded by Ministry of Research or funded by the Army to have even at the head of the working team people from the universities. It's true, they have impressive CVs and remarkable experience in theoretical field and in educational field, but in most cases they are less competent when it comes to deliver real and quality engineering and real products. And it's not just human level problem. It's also an institutional problem, because here in Romania, those who continues to receive larger budget are the National Research Institute. They have a poor track record of delivering something truly usable. Huge amount, maybe not huge, but enough amounts were granted for paper and not for deliver. This status quo needs to be changed. Another important topic is the resilience of supply chains and production resilience. What we have been trying to sell to the Romanian army for many years is the idea that it's much cheaper to have stock for raw material, for example, of microcontrollers and electronics component used in different parts of an UAV system, rather than have fully assembled functional blocks. Obviously, the semiconductor crisis during the pandemic caught us without sufficient funds, but not in my company. AFT, my company have enough stocks of raw material. Therefore, I believe that the ability to build starting from almost zero and a more vertical integrated production philosophy, if it is carefully managed, can ensure resilience even at low cost. The best example of this is how the automotive industry was affected by the semiconductor crisis. We can learn from the companies that was relatively unaffected, Tesla and its resilience coming from vertical production philosophy. To summarize, reducing bureaucracy and changing the KPI in the evaluation of R&D projects, encouraging a more vertically integrated approach to production where it's possible. From my perspective, these are the most important topics in my field of work. I am pleased to see an increasing desire from many companies and entities in the USA to undertake projects in Romania in the UAV field. I am glad about what's happened in Austin, which as far as I can see is a leading in business relocation. I enjoy seeing the innovation boom happen there. I hope this lesson will be adopted in Romania as well. I rely on the many people in this room who I know have the power to make change. I am glad with the experience of the Euro-Atlantic Resilience Forum, and I thank the Euro-Atlantic Center of Resilience for the opportunity to speak openly in front of such a distinguished audience. Great job. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Emmanuel. I want to say that it was very hard for us to convince Emmanuel to come here and to speak, because you see he is an engineer dedicated to his company, building important products for defense and security sector. And yeah, you saw that here in Romania we have a huge lack of advisory teams. So these kind of companies, they do not know how they can grab the opportunities, how to talk with the beneficiary, how to attract money, how to market their products, and so on. And maybe now you understand why I'm so insistent when I'm talking with our United States partners that we need your expertise and we need your mentorship to go further, because we have the talent, we have the high-tech companies, we have huge opportunities as being here at the Black Sea near the Ukraine conflict and being in this region and the eastern flank and defending the free world. And we cannot do this without your help. So I think Emmanuel did a very good job in explaining the status quo and maybe inspire you to see or to find what solution we can build together. Aaron, you have the floor for the final, I don't know, injects in this panel.
Well, thank you again for having us. I think the challenge question from the last speaker really has been thrown down. Ukraine, if I may quote, Ukraine has bought us time. Have we done anything with this time? I think is a very, very pointed question and a very important question of, okay, well, where do we go from here? So I would like to turn to each of my panelists and to get some final thoughts of where does this leave your mind as far as opportunities, areas where we can further collaborate, any dreams that have come out of this that you would like to see become reality? Going to start us off, Gordon?
Sure. I'm actually going to share a story that I just thought of because Emmanuel and some of the other discussions here that might be helpful, might be interesting. It's a story about an American startup that one of the co-founders was from Serbia, an immigrant to the U.S. When he was in college. And I wonder if we're still on. Liliana, can y'all still hear us?
Yes, of course, we are here.
That's fine, no problem. As long as you're there, that's all that's important.
Still
Serbian
here.
immigrant founder to the U.S. starts a startup. They decide to have some of their research and development done in Serbia, and they use outsourced companies to start that work. Over time, the company starts having a little bit of success, and so they start a Serbian company and start to hire some of these engineers there. I believe the team grew to 40 or 50 in Serbia. The company was recently acquired for a very large amount of money by an American Fortune 500. The Serbian employees made money. Some of them made $1 million each. So what just happened in Serbia as a result of this American company that decided to place their research and development in Serbia? You now have 50 employees that made more money than they could imagine. Some of them, probably most of them, will now have the freedom to start the startup they always wanted to start, and they're going to start it in Serbia, selling into the European market, and maybe deciding to sell into the U.S. as well. This is what I describe as flywheels. To get flywheels started, you need to start with small flywheels, and then they can get bigger, and you can start another one, and then the flywheels can start connecting together. So I wanted to tell the story because it was inspired through some of the discussions that just happened here, and I believe this is just one potential ingredient of success for the Romanian startup and innovation ecosystem.
A couple of the folks in attendance there in Bucharest and I and Brandon and I were in Warsaw just about a week ago. And one of the things that was apparent to me was that the panels were great, the forums were great, but really where the value came was in the sidebar discussions. And I think what I'm taking away from your comments, Gordon, is that success garners more success. People that are finding success in international partnerships that are empowered, that create, enable others to go on and be empowered and create. So we would love the energy that is here in Austin to help Bucharest and Romania grow and be successful, and in that way, the entire eastern flank and the entire European partnerships across the other side of the ocean to grow and find that success that we found here. Brandon, I think you look eager for the next comment.
I was just going to follow up on the connection to the Warsaw Forum a couple of weeks ago. One of the speakers there said that the Ukraine is going to be the next Israel from a defense innovation speed. And I've been going to Israel since 2008, working counterterrorism technologies. And the reason we went there was because of the innovation cycle and how fast things went from prototype to executing, real world missions with that technology. And obviously the war in Ukraine is providing a similar focus, a similar feedback loop, but it doesn't have to be just Ukraine. To your point about the entire eastern part of the European Union, if we're focused on listening and watching and participating, we just got back from Ukraine as a team not too long ago. We'll go back again in a few weeks. Taking those lessons learned from the battlefield and applying them to prepare for South China Sea, future Russian aggression, or just contingency operations around the world. It doesn't have to be that Israel's got the monopoly on defense innovation speed, or that Ukraine is going to be the next. It can be Romania is going to be the next fastest defense innovator. The United States, I hope, could be a model for that too. So,
Thank you, Brandon and Gordon. Colonel McVeigh, do you want to close us out? Any final thoughts, comments?
I appreciate it. I appreciate the time. And as Liliana mentioned, I look forward to the opportunity to visit Romania next month and to continue this ongoing discussion. I try to think, what is it that the Romanians can do next? And I can relate it back to the way that the Army Applications Laboratory seeks to solve problems. And this is a problem. So I think the approach may be similar. But listen to your audience, listen to the companies in Romania who are telling you what their problems are, seek to understand them, collaborate with them, and then just start implementing change to solve those immediate problems. And as you do that, I think a strategy will evolve over time. Document that strategy and try to work towards a goal. And I'm sure where you end up will not be where you envision at the start, but it will certainly be in a better place for the future.
Thank you, Colonel. Again, thank you to our partners in Bucharest for having us all here. We will be available for any other questions that are mulling around in your heads, but I'll pass this back to Dr. Phillip.
Thank you so much. So I was looking at the clock and I saw that we stayed here without the break and we discussed a lot, and I believe that each of us, we have many other ideas that we need to continue to discuss. We promise that we will do in the future other kinds of this interaction with the United States, and as Colonel McVeigh said, he will be next month here in Romania. I want to address an invitation to all of these present to stay and to contribute to these efforts, because we start this process of connection, but we cannot continue alone. And that being said, I think we need to address a huge round of applause to our partners in Capital Factory. Thank you so much. And I'm very grateful, and I can't wait to visit you again. And for the final words, I will invite Valentin Ene, and I thank you because he believed that we can insert this kind of panel, this kind of conversation in Euro-Atlantic Resilience Forum, and without him we couldn't be here. So I will kindly ask him to deliver the final words of this panel.
Thank you, Liliana. Thank you. I have a full page of conclusions that I can read. I'm joking, of course. A quote comes in my mind that in a room, if we all think alike, someone is not thinking. I strongly believe it does not apply here. We obviously think alike and we are not mistaken. We are happy that we made this panel in this form. We are a platform at the Euro-Atlantic Resilience Center. We are a facilitator and the force multiplier. But you have to take over from here. This is why you're seeing this mix. You have Liliana, you have Aaron, you have NGOs that focus on transatlantic cooperation, you have the private company, you have tech accelerators, and you have the government. So I think, and I'm proud that we did our job, and I hope that this will be a start of something with impact. Thank you all. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you again for being with us. Enjoy your evening in Romania and enjoy your day in Texas.
Thank you. Bye.